Hello, internet friends. My name is Bay, and welcome to the Battle for Azeroth beta and the second pass for the Arms Warrior. So between Fury Arms and Protection, of course, I have a little bit of knowledge about these, tanking with them online all throughout Legion. And Fury and Arms, if you've watched the Prot Paladin video, remember that the block stuff has changed, so go check out the Prot Warrior video for that. And yes, Ignore Pain is still there for that, but this video is all about the Arms Warrior and the talent adjustments therein. These spells and abilities have been lost or gained, what's been kept from your Legion artifacts and legendaries, new graphics, a brief overview of the War Mode talent system, and any big GCD changes. Oh no. There's no true gameplay, of course, in this video, in this series, so consider this more of a one-man podcast walkthrough primer of what it's going to be like going from Legion into the Battle for Azeroth, and of course the entire second pass testing VOD and all the first pass ones it's linked down below in the video description box below. They're all found over on my Twitch channel, and you can go check those out down there. The schedule guide down below, that'll also give you a huge graph chart thing layout of all of the different testing that I've done so far. We're getting close to the end, so if you want to go back and check any of those out, go down there and click those links. And of course, comments, thoughts about Arms Warrior, leave those down below, of course. And then if you are new to the channel and enjoy my ramblings, consider hitting the subscribe button or the bell next to subscribe. That's the new notification button. So if you want to know when new videos come out, of course, or new shows in the future, all that is down below. So we are still playing a gnome, which for some reason people don't like or whatnot. He's just a gnome. It's all right though, okay? I'm not playing a goblin. That would have been even worse. So the first thing I want to bring up, why I was this stupid, give me that, there we go. The biggest change, and the preface, that's why I don't know how to really go over this without it sounding so bad, is the Tactician update and the Deep Wounds mastery change. So Tactician is awesome now, feels great. However, your new mastery is Deep Wounds, which is just a bleed off of your primary main abilities. So Mortal Strike, Execute, Blade Storm, and one other. And I guess two others if you talent into certain things. So the problem with this is from the Warrior Discord. So you can go check out the Warrior Discord for a whole lot more information about this. But I'm going to read you what I have that they have pinned, I guess. So Deep Wounds is currently bugged in that every ability which inflicts Deep Wounds causes a different number of ticks. This problem is I reported this 3 months ago when I first did my alpha video for Arms in March. Still not working properly, which impacts certain talent layouts right now, which is unfortunate. So overall, we have Cleave gives you 3 ticks per target. Mortal Strike is 4 ticks. Execute is 5 ticks. Blade Storm and Ravager tick 9 to 10 times, so it keeps refreshing. And the 10th tick isn't consistent and is also truncated because of possible haste scaling. There's a whole lot of nonsense happening with this one, but overall, it's just a really solid, scalable attack power, plus your mastery stat Bleed. Of course, Bleeds ignore armor. So it has strong potential to be just a really consistent form of damage, considering that it sort of smooths out the damage of the Arms Warrior. Arms is kind of slow, it's very chunky, and you'll see it when I start hitting the target dummies. So Deep Wounds is like this constant back-end tick. It raises the floor of your overall damage, so it's not just like so awkwardly spiky on only abilities, right? So it's a positive change, but it's just not working right. Or if it is working right, it needs to be updated to show you where its damage comes from per ability that you use it on. Because right now it's just awkward. The Tactician update, however, is up to a 1.4% chance per rage to reset the cooldown on Overpower. So this is up from the 0.75% per rage spent on rage spending abilities. So it's a lot more frequent that you have this change, this juggle in the rotation. Overpower now, no longer a talent, is a core rotational ability. 12-second cooldown, not reduced by haste, deals physical damage, cannot be blocked, dodged, or parried, and it increases the damage of your next mortal strike by 20% up to 2 stacks, or modified by talents. I have the new Dreadnought talent, which is kind of like Mortal Combo, but rolled over to Overpower, where Overpower has 2 charges baseline. Feels great because you have that proc protection, and increases the damage of your Mortal Strike by an additional 10%. So it goes 20 to 40 or 30 to 60. And this is the core of what the Arms Warrior will play like. So you get your Overpowers in there. Let's get a Skull Splitter, why not? Big double stacked Overpower Mortal Strike. Of course, there's the PvP dummy in front of me here, but it's a solo dummy, so I don't have to worry about any random cleave happening. But it's not even that slow, to be quite honest with you. You definitely have to weave in some slams. Who's ready to slam all expansion? Yes! But this is the new Skull Splitter here. Of course, you can still do the leap out between autos and charge back in for rage. I'm not sure if that's going to be really good. It comes into play here and there. There's the Overpower getting reset and the proc protection from having Juggernaut. But I mean, this is the rotation, basically, right? Mostly GCD locked, of course, depending on how you want to look at GCD lock coming from hitting slam. Let's do a Blade Storm. If you watch the Fury Warrior video, you'll know that Blade Storm now has haste scaling. So does Arms Blade Storm, but Arms Blade Storm is a baseline much longer cast. So overall, other news that I have here, we have Execute. Execute for our Fury as well is a builder now. It builds their rotation to go teeter-tottering back and forth between building and spending rage. Execute for the Arms Warrior, however, now has been cleaned up. It's 20 to 40 rage, and then damage is dealt. The tooltip says the max damage. So that is what it costs for 40 rage. It gives that much damage, so it just cuts it down by half if you're at 20, basically. You obviously want to spend at 40 rage, right? At least 40 rage normally, but you can't always. Depends on the situation. So now this is still a spender, but you gain a ton of rage on auto attacks. If you noticed that right there when I was just whacking away at the target dummy. So this is a reversion. Earlier in the builds, they had actually cut down how much rage you got on auto attacks, but they have reverted that whole system. So a non-crit auto attack is 27 rage, and they have a new passive here called Seasoned Soldier, where your auto attack critical strikes generate 30% more rage. So that means an auto attack normal 27, a crit is 35 with like a little bit of decimal points there, so average is like a 27 to 28 on a normal auto attack, and then 35 to 36 on a crit auto attack. And then there is one talent that can work with this, which is the new War Machine, which is just 10% more rage across the board. And that just applies to the base amount. And then, of course, your Seasoned Soldier passive would take effect after that. But that is your rage mechanic. You build plenty of rage. With charging and possibly leaping in and out there, and obviously having, you know, slam doesn't really cost anything. Overpower being free, so you're still auto-attacking behind Overpower happening. The rage now flows pretty smoothly. It was much slower, awkwardly so, earlier on in the early beta builds, because you did about, it was like 20-ish% less. I think auto attacks were like 21 rage. So that requires 2 autos even for some Mortal Strike, and that felt really weird. So this is just right there. Feels pretty good. Sweeping Strikes. This is baseline. I see that on my bar down below. It's a bit weaker-ish, but not necessarily. It has a bit more functionality now. The live version is only Execute and Mortal Strike with AoE. So now you have 25-second cooldown, 10 seconds when you activate it. It is on the global cooldown. Only has like the animation, but you know, so be it. But it's your damaging abilities hit one additional target within 8 yards for 75% of the damage. However, that 75% in the recent build was turned to 100%, and the tooltip is still broken, or the tooltip is right and the build is incorrect. But you know, beta will beta of all things. So by default, you just turn this on, and your single target attacks will hit things nearby. Of course, the upgraded buffed Mortal Strikes will of course hit that +1 target. That is all how this works. They hit and crit independently, and of course apply deep wounds as per normal. So that is the core rotational 2-target cleave mechanic with sweeping strikes. And you can do some shenanigans with this. Abilities that generate rage, for example, they do not generate more rage than they're supposed to. But spreading debuffs and things like Rend, for example, Rend will, of course, cleave to the additional target, stuff like that would. And the baseline Colossus Smash, let me turn this off because I have the Warbreaker talented right now. Baseline Colossus Smash will, of course, hit 2 targets. And then both targets are debuffed. So that all works just fine because all your damaging abilities will do this. So your stun doesn't cleave 2 targets, though. People were asking about if Stormbolt would hit 2 targets. Unfortunately not. That would be neat, but nope. Overall, that is your baseline ability stuff. Then you have, of course, Battle Shout returns. So you have your Battle Shout back. That is your warrior group-oriented buff. It's 10% attack power. So get ready to use that whenever someone gets battle res and dies and has to, make sure can you Battle Shout, please? That's happening again. Intimidating your shout. Yes. Remains. The version of this for the Prot Warrior with the new Menace talent is really, really nice if you haven't seen that. Oh, clicked off the screen there. Sorry about that. And then Commanding Shout, which has been renamed back to Rallying Cry. What is this? It's got to be a... it's a trinket. The Vanquished Tentacle of Gahoon. So Rallying Cry goes back to being its real name, no longer is Commanding Shout. Cleave, no longer baseline. You see there's no cleave in here. It's on my bar, just filling it up with buttons, but that's now a talent. And then again, we went over arms. Blade Storm is 6 seconds reduced by haste. The Fury one is 4 reduced by haste, so it always fits into Enrage and windows like that. Whereas the arms one still remains a much longer channel. So overall, comparing apples to oranges here, it's more damage, but the Fury one is buffed by Enrage, whereas the Arms one is just its own thing. Of course, you still auto-attack during Blade Storm, so you actually get a ton of rage just from like the 2 or 3 autos that go off during the Blade Storm. So you come out of a Blade Storm with full rage normally because of the rage talked about earlier, right? So that's all your baseline stuff. Everything else you still have here, of course, is the same. Colossus Smash, you see, is now your main cooldown. There is no more Battle Cry. You have no Recklessness, that kind of stuff. Your base cooldown is Blade Storm. So Colossus Smash syncs with every other by default. And then, of course, you saw that you can Sweeping Strikes your Colossus Smash to hit multiple things. But everything else there is still the same. 20 rage on Slam, 30 rage on Mortal Strike. The tooltip for this actually says 25% healing reduction instead of the reduces healing, which was always so appreciated. So now we've got that back. Only took them 2 expansions. There we go. And everything else you saw already. So we'll bring up the talent panel now and get a little more into how all of this comes together. So there's your talent panel here, and there is your live talent panel. So first off, on the removed fronts, Dauntless has been removed. Overpower made baseline. Sweeping Strikes made baseline. Shockwave is gone, so no AoE stun anymore for the Arms Warrior, which is kind of a sticky point. People brought that up while we were testing, but we'll see. Trauma's gone. Mortal Combo, again, was removed, but sort of rolled into the new Dreadnought talent down here. Titanic Might, Focused Rage, and Opportunity Strikes. Those are all out of there. Updated talents. We have the much talked about new Fervor of Battle. This is 10% whirlwind damage, and you slam your primary target. Now, whirlwind by itself is just whirlwind. It costs 30 rage, and you hit all targets around you within 8 yards for physical damage. But the update to Fervor of Battle means that you actually slam when you whirlwind. You slam your main target. You can see here in the combat log, whenever you hit your whirlwind, you'll see slam cast as well. If you look at the animation, you also see a blue streak on top of your sword. That's the same as when you actually slam normally, the blue hit. So to denote that that's what's happening. If you don't have that talented, you don't actually see that. I mean, we're going to drop out of combat here. Whirlwind by itself does not actually have that blue. There's like the baseline blue, that's because my transmog on my weapon, but the top arc of the slam is removed from that. But Fervor of Battle has potential to be used single target then, because instead of just slamming, you would just hit Whirlwind. But slam is 20 rage, and Whirlwind itself is 30. But you basically just gain the extra Whirlwind damage on top of normally slamming. And that only comes down and into play because of Rend apparently not being worth the global right now. By default, I had a hard time understanding this, and this, of course, this is a numbers thing. Rend is 30 rage. Whirlwind is 30 rage. Rend does a lot of damage and can be applied to 2 targets, 3 targets, 4 targets through sweeping strikes, and it always ignores armor. They did make it 12 seconds, up from an 8-second dot. That's mostly for a single target rotation, so it's not as crowded. But Fervor of Battle, even with the slam, and even with hitting 2 targets, because if you have Fervor of Battle and you actually activate sweeping strikes, you will gain 2 slams. If I can auto-attack this target. There we go. So you'll slam another nearby target, which is totally fine. But that's still less damage than Rend. It's more damage up front, and it costs more rage over time, and it does more damage with more rage, but Rend costs less. That's just a numbers thing. I don't really care about numbers. Rend, I showed off in the beginning of the video, feels really good in the single target rotation because you just keep it up all the time. You can pandemic it, of course, and then it will sync up with the Colossus smash window and do more damage during that tick rate. Whereas Fervor of Battle just costs a lot of rage. So I'm not sure how that's going to play out, but again, numbers, not a big thing. But that's what the Fervor of Battle does. Additionally, you'll see a lot of change around and moves in your overall talent panel above there, which that is a huge swing around. So yeah, I put here on Rend, Sweeping Strikes plus Rend. You can also Colossus Smash with that. Deadly Calm, I wanted to bring this up. This is now off the GCD and moves places, of course, a little bit. They just switched it to the side, but everything else around it moved. So Deadly Calm is still a 1-minute cooldown off the global that for the next 6 seconds, your rage costing abilities are free. And this still does work with anger management now, but it's kind of hard to look at unless you actually combat log it. But I had people telling me that it does work and it doesn't work. I don't know. You're not spending rage, so anger management, you're not spending anything. But I also have people arguing with me that it is working because of cooldown reductions still work regardless of if you spend or not. It's when you actually would have spent them. Whatever. That's totally fine. Let me know if it actually is working or not. Small note, Deadly Calm, of course, is just a sort of a rotational burst, especially quality of life being off the GCD again. But that competes now with Avatar, which is just Avatar. Same exact functionality, 90-second cooldown, 20 seconds of 20% increased damage, removes all roots and snares, syncs up with Bladestorm by itself without anger management coming into play, because anger management is Colossus Smash and Bladestorm. So this would always sync up with every one to help you with through that burst. But we talked about it in the Fury Warrior video, because of the actual aggro change. I'll put this up the screen right up. Bloop. Because of the aggro change, Bladestorm is pulling aggro over tanks because it's so much damage for so consistently, and tanks only do 4 times damage as threat, and tanks are like 40 to 50%, if that, of a DPS right now. So they're barely above in the threat game. So you have to be careful with your Bladestorms now. So Avatar Bladestorm with like a Warbreaker going off might just kill you. So we'll see about that. And that competes, of course, with the new In for the Kill, which the cooldown interaction has been updated. So now this works on just Colossus Smash, will give you 10% haste or 20% if the target is in the 20% or lower execute window and lasts for 10 seconds. So In for the Kill can stack really well with anger management. More Colossus Smash, more passive haste synergy, and of course it scales with the execute window in that regard. And that brings me right over to new talents. You have Sudden Death, Skull Splitter, War Machine, Impending Victory, Massacre, Collateral Damage, Warbreaker, which is your artifact active. I'll show it off in a moment. Cleave, move from baseline to be over here in the AoE tier. And then Dreadnought, which I've already gone over a few times. To go right back on this In for the Kill anger management potential, Massacre, which both you as an Arms Warrior and a Fury Warrior have now, is just that Execute is usable on targets below 35% health. This finds itself in this tier of being in a weird place, because Massacre works with AoE. You can 2-target Sweeping Strikes Massacre, because you can activate Sweeping Strikes on one target that is in the execute window and other targets around that aren't, and you can still execute 2 targets. That totally still works and exists. That is why Fervor versus Rend here are strange. And to go back to the beginning of the video, Execute just deals more more deep wounds damage because of how it's like back-end hidden scaling, that each different ability deals different amounts of deep wounds. So it all goes back to deep wounds. If they can fix this silly mastery, then hopefully they can make your talents feel a little bit more. You pick them when it matters. Massacre has a huge potential on fights like Mythic Agrimar, Mythic Argus when you're in the execute window for so damn long. Whereas Fervor obviously has AoE and Cleave potential and being a good possible single target rotation change. And then Rend has that 2-target to 3-target Sweeping Strikes, Bleed Cleave build, and of course giving you the armor penetration synergy there. But by default, in for the kill, Anger Management Massacre could be pretty good. Earlier executes don't matter for in for the kill, but in for the kill giving you 20% haste, and Anger Management giving you more Colossus Smash, and Massacre being activated earlier, because again, execute is a cooldown that's all based on rage spending. If you're auto-attacking faster, you get all that more rage. So it could be nice. But that's a talent choice, right? That's obviously putting a lot of your eggs in the execute basket if the fight is calling for it. Additionally, on the new talents, we went all the way back up to the top here. So we have Skull Splitter. This is a cooldown, 21 seconds reduced by haste. It's just a slightly stronger slam. It's at 1071 damage, and its slam is about 880 right now. Slam does cost rage, and of course can proc Tactician, whereas Skull Splitter is a little more damage, but generates rage to keep the rotation moving. If the rotation you need is for more rage. And again, I showed off that Skull Splitter does not... It hits 2 targets with Sweeping Strikes, but it won't give you 40 rage. That'd be ridiculous. And that competes with Sudden Death, which is the legendary ring procs that just give you the extra executes. And then, of course, these always act as if you spent 40 rage. This was actually just retuned in a recent build to actually have a little less RPPM. It went from like 2.6-ish to like 1.8 times haste. So they definitely cut it down by about 1 to 2 procs per minute to keep it in line, because it was procking once every 10 seconds or so. It was ridiculous. For Fury, especially. Arms, not so much, but that, of course, still feels fine. And then the new War Machine went over it briefly earlier, but it's just the 10% more rage in your auto attacks. And then when you kill a target, you gain rage and increase your move speed by 30% for 8 seconds. Good for open world content out there. That could be where it falls into play right there. We also had Stormbolt moved. Double Time is still here the same. And Impending Victory is both here for all the warriors now. You all have Victory Rush. You all have Impending Victory. The potential for this to be a huge bonus for when you're taking a lot of damage in raids is going to be very, very nice, due to the fact that you can obviously combine it with Rally, and then Impending Victory, get a big old chunky heal there every 30 seconds, and another way to survive. The healing on the Fury Warrior definitely is a little higher now, depending on what kind of build you take. But all warriors having on-demand healing is definitely going to help them out in the overall survivability category. If you don't need to stun, you don't need more charge reduction, right? So that is definitely a potential for your defensives, because you see you still have defensive stance. Defensive stance remains the 20% reduced all damage taken, but you also deal 10% less damage until canceled. So you have that as your baseline option. And of course, you still have your main base cooldown, which is Die by the Sword. But that's your only other option, right? 3-minute cooldown where you have 100% parry chance and you take 30% reduced damage for 8. So defensive stance comes like a locked-in talent a lot for endgame rating at Mythic Plus. And of course, that competes with more mobility on Bounding Stride and Second Wind, which Second Wind is like PvP-ish, kind of for kiting away and healing yourself, or for just world questing. But defensive stance sort of becomes defaulted. It's kind of unfortunate that it's just so good, but you can go in and out of defensive stance for everything. Just has to wait for the 6-second cooldown. That is of course unchanged. On that, front as we keep going down here. Whoops, I just moved my notes. We have Collateral Damage. Going back on the whole deep wounds thing, Collateral Damage is when your abilities damage a second target due to sweeping strike. They refund at 20% of their rage cost. This does not work on sudden death, but of course does work with just sweeping strikes execute, and sweeping strikes execute by itself as if your foe survived. 30% of the rage spent is refunded. This sort of stacks and makes the 2-target execute sweeping strikes really crazy. But again, execute is so much more damage with deep wounds. If they fix it, it won't be as egregious and awkward. We'll have to wait and see. This competes with Warbreaker, which is just your artifact active from live. No longer does it deal shadow damage, however, it's just your AoE Colossus Smash. So it's the exact same damage, same cooldown, it just makes it an AoE. So you can combine that, of course, with Blade Storm and Avatar and do some sick AoE burst damage and then end up pulling aggro and dying. We'll see. And then your sort of passive rotational cleave is the new cleave, which is a cooldown reduced by haste, where you cleave everything in front of you with a sweeping attack for physical damage. If you hit 3 or more targets, it'll just inflict deep wounds, which is pretty nice because this will probably not kill you. And if you don't need the rage, if you're not doing the Massacre execute sweeping strikes, cleave in and of itself is just a lot of just passive good damage, just because you just weave it in. Because cleave costs 20 rage, you can also reset Tactician, so you can work on it with there. And you can also do the cleave under the CS window at least to do a little more damage on the 2 targets you're hitting. But you're going to keep applying deep wounds over and over and over again. It becomes an AoE deep wounds mechanic, but again, deep wounds scaling, blah. And for the kill, we already went over that. Avatar, Deadly Calm, Anger Management, Dreadnought, and of course Ravager is still right down here as the replacement to Blade Storm, where you can throw your Blade Storm every 1 minute. Its damage goes down a bit because you can throw it every 30 seconds faster. This will now, of course, desync with things like Avatar, unless you delay it, right? But then, of course, generates 7 rage each time it deals damage. The rage this generates is only every time it ticks. It's not every time it ticks on every target. You see it goes up by 7 each pulse, basically. So I was making sure in the testing that this didn't all of a sudden become... There are some other mechanics in the game now that say effects like this, but are actually dealing damage every single time they do damage. So in this case, hitting 3 targets, it would have given you, if this was the case, 21 rage every time it ticked, but it doesn't do that. But of course, you can Ravager, you can Sweeping Strikes, you can Fervor of Battle, because you can be AoEing and slamming AoEing and whirlwinding during your Ravager for that type of AoE. And of course, you can add Cleave into that as well. Or you can Warbreaker into your Ravager with Fervor of Battle and CS going on. All this stuff, right? There are potentials here. The AoE builds, the burst or cleave or consistent damage between Arms and Fury both seem really customizable and competitive, if the numbers are not all wacky and messed up because of this. On that note, that is all of your new talents and all your rotational abilities all looked at. Really good single target potentials, really good AoE potentials, really possible like 2 or 3 target cleave potentials. There's some execute shenanigans that are coming into play there. More survivability. That's the Arms Warrior, and of course you can check out my rambles on the Fury Warrior if you haven't seen that yet to compare and contrast for yourself. The global cooldown changes real quick. Obviously, all the Sweeping Strikes is on the GCD when you activate it. Charge has a 0.5 global. They took what's it called? Heroic Leap off of its own little 0.5 global a while ago, and then Deadly Calm, which you can just use whenever you want. This is off the GCD. You just use it and it just happens, right? No animation for it, which is kind of a weird point. It just exists. Maybe they'll add an animation to it later, but right now there's nothing that happens to note that you are in Deadly Calm. That's overall everything. That's the Arms Warrior by default. Let's look at the War Mode talents real quick. This is turned on in your capital city of Orgrimmar or Stormwind. You gain 10% more XP for killing monsters, including quests. You gain more honor when you kill members of the opposite faction. A 10+ kill streak gives you the assassin buff, puts you in the bounty mode, marks you on the map, but you get 15% more damage and healing until you die. And then these talents are active in the open world. Of course, the PvP talents will be active in any PvP place, islands, arenas, battlegrounds, that kind of stuff. And also, of course, again, world questing. So go check out the WoWDB or the WoWhead calculators. You can read all the talents and make your own build and think about what you like to do. But you make one of your medallion talents here, and then you can pick any 3 of these talents. The Arms Warrior actually lost a handful because of a few potential really too good synergies, I guess. There's a couple that were actually just removed, so maybe they're going to come back or they're not done with this yet, but you can still make some pretty crazy builds. Like Storm of Destruction is reduced to the cooldown of Ravager or Bladestorm by 33%, and then Bladestorm or Ravager will also apply mortal wounds to all targets you hit. So you can throw a Ravager every 40 or so seconds that also AoE debuffs Mortal Strike, or you can just take Anger Management and have roughly a 1-ish minute cooldown on, or less, on Bladestorm for questing. That could be insane, right? Then you can also take Sharpened Blade, which a la Monster Hunter style is a 25-second cooldown where you activate it. Your next Mortal Strike will deal 30% increased damage and reduce healing taken by 50% on that target for 40 seconds. This, of course, can stack with the... where is it at? The Dreadnought bonus. So you can go to 60% more damage on a Mortal Strike by 2 charges of Overpower, and then add this to another 30% stack of Overpower. In the Avatar window, go 20% more damage. In the Warbreaker or Colossus Smash window, do 20% or 30% more damage, sorry, on top of this Sharpened Blade. Sure, okay. Or you can also add Shadow of the Colossus, where charge will reset the cooldown of your Overpower and rage gain from charge is increased. So now you can overpower more often to add even more stacks to Sharpened Blade to hit all of those sweet half health chunking or so Mortal Strikes, even just for PvE, right? That's going to be really helpful for chunking stuff down while questing or doing world quests and making that quicker, or catching the healer off guard with a huge hit. But you can take whatever you like here. You can do a super defensive build. So you can take Execute, has the 15-yard range, which you can compare with Massacre, or combine with Massacre, rather. So you can charge on executing, right? You can take Duel or Spell Reflect, all these kind of stuff. Not as many options, because going over to the PvP, yeah, you lost Rage Machine is gone, Death Row was removed, and Pain Train was removed. These were all things that worked. Well, Death Row is literally Massacre, just better. Rage Machine is just that non-periodic damage against you generated rage, but they buffed your base rage. So that's gone. Then Pain Train was the whole Battlecry thing, which Battlecry is gone. So those don't do anything anyway. So you can still make a build. Go check those out if you want to put together something. Let me know what you think of those, or what you think of the overall here for the Arms Warrior. Yeah, Bladestorm still hits really far away if you're a gnome. It just looks weird because the animation. But that is that. If you want to check out the entire VOD, video description box down below, of course. Down there in the video description box, there's a whole bunch of links. All my social media is down there too. My Twitch channel where everything is hosted. Of course, you can join my Discord server if you'd like. If you have any questions for me, or want to be up to date on when new shows are coming out, want to be able to submit questions for upcoming live shows when those come back up, so you can be part of the show in that regard, or to keep up to date with everything that's going on the channel. I appreciate everyone listening and watching. Go check out the Fury Warrior video to see how much that's changed. But outside of that, again, thank you all for listening to the rambles, and I will see you all in the next Battle for Azeroth Beta Second Pass video.